Sorry about the bad glare this morning, but you'll notice I'm in a slightly different setting than you're used to. No cars around and a different type of vehicle behind me. For my job, I spend lots and lots of time in an airport and on airplanes, so this might be one of the times that I have to film some of the videos that I don't need to be in the car for. So you'll hear from me from airports, you'll hear from me from airplanes. This week I'm going to touch San Francisco 3 times, 2 other airports, Calgary and Honolulu, and I will update you from those cities. Being at the airport made me think of one thing that I want to do a bit of a talk piece on. What's the difference between aircraft autopilot and Tesla Autopilot? Aircraft autopilot's been around for a very long time. May or may not be more complex depending on how you think about it. It's moving a bigger vehicle, it's moving a vehicle with more people in it, but it has less things to get in the way, it doesn't have to react as quickly. So I want to talk about some of those details. 24 hours later, I'm in yet another airport. I'm up in Calgary right now, about to head to San Francisco for a layover, and then off to Honolulu. I'm not sure if you can actually tell right now due to the reflections, but I am sitting at an airport. We've got a WestJet aircraft out there. We've got an Air Canada hangar across the way. Autopilot as a concept has existed in aviation and all sorts of other industries, whether that's maritime or mining or other things for a real long time. So it's no surprise that it starts to expand to other industries which may or may not be more complex. And I want to talk through some of the reasons why, I really think that auto is one of the most complex, and once they get that right, it'll be interesting to see what happens when some of those new technologies get leveraged backwards into industries that have had what I'll call more simple autopilots for a very long time now. So I'm actually a private pilot, and while I haven't flown in a while, a couple of years ago was probably my last flight, I do use autopilot in the little Cessna 175 that I fly. Autopilot is a pretty simple system. It just says, hey, I'm going to take some inputs from one set of sensors, make a decision, and then do something with those inputs, whether it's keep doing what I'm doing or change something. In aviation, there's actually quite a big range of autopilots. There's autopilot like I use in the Cessnas that I rent, which is basically, we'll call it path hold, right? Tell it to keep flying the direction you're flying, at the speed you're flying, at the altitude you're flying. Adjust for wind and turbulence and all that kind of stuff, but keep doing what you're doing, right? That is an autopilot system, and that works very well. Then it's all the way up to commercial autopilot on some of the more advanced or newer aircraft that have things like Cat 3 Autoland. A lot of times when you're flying and when you're landing, that's being done by a computer, not by the pilots. Autopilot in aviation, however, is still taking directions from a pilot, right? They say go from A to B, program that in terms of waypoints which are given to them by air traffic control, and then it flies that pattern in that direction. Hey, it can make turns, it can go up and down, but those instructions need to be given to it by an operator, right? The pilot. That's the big difference between, I think, an autopilot like in aviation and autopilot in the car. Is the autopilot in a car, while it will, get its directions or its routing as you program in a route or ask it to take you from A to B, it's making more decisions on traffic and other things in real time. And now we're getting to the point where it can even make the decision whether or not to change lanes, take an off-ramp, etc., right? So it's making a whole lot more decisions, and to make those decisions, it needs a whole lot more information. Cars are working just in a more complex environment that's changing more frequently than what an aircraft does, right? Once you're up in the air, their congestion, traffic compared to air traffic is, a factor of probably a million lower. You don't have things getting in your way as often. Yes, there's birds, but hey, an aircraft's not going to move for a bird. So you're working in a more complex environment that changes more frequently. So you need more sensors, more computing power, and faster decisions to react according to that. And that's why I think that Autopilot for cars, or Tesla's Autopilot, is taking longer to develop. And the reason being is that in this more complex environment, you're going to have more what they call edge cases, right? You can plan for things that happen often. Let's use one example: coming up to a stop sign, right? It goes from yellow to red, and that means to stop. There are different shapes of stoplights. There are different patterns that they go through. There are different lane setups that happen. There are what happens if someone runs a red light in front of you, right? Those are all what I'd call edge cases that you need to make sure you're planned for before you go full autopilot. Now, autopilot in the air, what's an edge case? There really aren't that many. Wind speed changes. Well, I need to react to that. When direction changes, I need to react to that. All of a sudden, some sensor stops sending data. I need to react to that. But those are all, a smaller volume of edge cases and maybe easier to react to. And you also have two pilots monitoring a system, very actively to adjust for that. So I think that's where the difference is. That you need a whole lot more data to collect so that you can program around those edge cases to really get to a point where you can roll out a system that's fully automated and takes less, what I'll call, babysitting from the operator. For an aviation geek, it doesn't get much better than this. You've got a 787 behind me with all the fancy new GSE or ground service equipment that they require to handle the aircraft. And interestingly enough, most of it's electric. I'm going to cut to a quick data sheet that I made comparing aircraft autopilot to Tesla Autopilot. I know it's all probably an oversimplification of things, both on the aircraft side and the Tesla side, but I think it gives a relatively decent comparison between the complexities of the two. So I built up two sheets. One is inputs and one is calculations that describe what I think the differences are between aircraft autopilot and Tesla Autopilot. Firstly, let me just say that I know this isn't scientific. I know it's not 100% accurate, but from an outsider looking in without doing a lot of research, here's what I think about the two systems. So starting with the inputs here, you can see that Tesla uses a significantly higher number of sensors, and to make that even more interesting, a lot of the sensors that are listed here are cameras. Now that means they're not just sensing for one thing, but they're grabbing in a video image, which then can be trained to take in and define multiple inputs, right? Taking video and turning it into structured data. This can be anything from where the lines are, is there something in my way, do I need to speed up, slow down, etc. So as you can see, Tesla's taking in a lot more information than aircraft. If I jump to the calculations page, all the ones for the aircraft autopilot are going to be the same for Tesla. Am I going the right speed? Do I need to speed up, slow down? Do I need to turn or not turn? Is everything functional, etc.? I've grouped those into a couple of categories. Am I doing something, and do I need to change what I'm doing? If you look over at the Tesla side, there's actually a third category, which is the what is or what are categories, right? It's using video and its other sensors to define what it should be doing first, and then making the am I or do I need to decisions based on that. The big difference is when you look at aircraft, the what is / are decisions are being made by an operator, plugging data into a computer, whereas Tesla Autopilot can make those themselves. So, as I said, I know this is imperfect, but there's a fundamental difference here between aircraft autopilot and Tesla Autopilot, and I think, that's going to make all the difference, and it will be very interesting to see what happens when the artificial intelligence portion of Autopilot and what I'm calling what is decisions are shifted over and applied to the aviation industry. So I think it's going to get really interesting as aircraft manufacturers apply artificial intelligence to their autopilot systems and a bit more computing horsepower than they do currently. The challenge will be is that you can make planes more efficient and effective in the sky. You can make them fly closer together. You can land them and get them off the runways and taxiways quicker. But part of the problem is that just means moving more people through an airport infrastructure quicker, and that infrastructure is already constrained. So, we'll be very curious to see how this plays out if and when manufacturers, start using more artificial intelligence, and what the impact of that is. The other thing to consider is, what happens to pilots once this is in place. I think you'll never get rid of the redundancy that they bring, but the question will be, can you get down to one pilot? Can you put those pilots on the ground managing multiple aircraft? This isn't going to happen anytime soon due to pilots unions, but over time, everything's bound to evolve. It's just a matter of when. Well, off to the next one. On my way to Honolulu. Be there for a couple of days before heading home. Anyway, thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up below. If you liked it and want to see more, hit the subscribe button. And if you're looking to buy a Tesla Model 3, Model S, or Model X anytime in the near future, use my referral code. It'll get you free supercharging, and it'll help me get closer to winning a Tesla Roadster. If and when I win that Roadster, I'm going to let everybody who used my referral code drive it. Until next time.